On the 1st of July 1916, between 7:30 in the morning and nightfall, the British Army loses 57,000 men, a full third of them dead, along a stretch of French farmland you could cycle across in an afternoon. It is the worst single day in the history of the British military, before or since. The men who walk into it are volunteers, friends, whole streets and factories and football clubs in uniform. And the war they are walking into still has 2.5 years left to run. This is the Western Front, and your family's line runs straight through it. Understand the machine before you meet it. The Western Front is two systems of ditches, facing each other from Switzerland to the North Sea, over 400 miles of trench, wire and gun, dug by both sides in the autumn of 1914 when the armies tried to outrun each other to the coast and failed. It has barely moved in 2 years. Millions of men live inside it, below ground level, within shouting distance of men they will never see. It is the largest, most crowded, most dangerous structure human beings have ever built, and it produces almost nothing but casualties. This is the Western Front, and the year is 1916. You are a private, 19 years old, and this is your whole war. At every rank the trenches let a man reach, which is not many and not for long. You are 20, and you volunteered, because the poster asked and the whole street went and there was no work at home, and this, they said, would be the great adventure of your life. It is the last true thing anyone will tell you for 4 years. You joined with the lads you grew up with, a pals battalion they called it, whole streets and works and football teams enlisting together so they could serve side by side. No one told you that meant you would die side by side too, that one bad morning could empty a whole town's worth of young men at once. That knowledge is still ahead of you. For now it is just your mates, and a uniform, and a train. France announces itself before you ever see it. Waiting at the Channel ports, on a clear, still day, the men of Kent can hear the guns of the Somme grumbling across the water like weather, a war in France audible in England. You cross on a packed steamer, march up roads lined with poplars and supply dumps, and somewhere on that march the horizon begins to flicker at night, and the older hands stop joking, and you understand that the flickering is where you live now. There is no lay here, no wage worth the name, no gold. There is a shilling a day and a rifle and a number. And the oldest arrangement of all, the one every one of your ancestors would recognize, the poor man's body spent for another man's purpose, dressed up as glory. The private. The trench teaches you at once, with mud and fear, the only two instructors this war keeps. You live in a ditch in the ground, in water to your knees, among rats and the smell of the unburied, and you learn that most of a soldier's war is not fighting, but waiting, cold, wet, sleepless waiting, for the thing you are most afraid of. Learn the system, because the system is your address. The front line, where you fight. The support line behind it, and the reserve behind that, all stitched together by communication trenches like streets in a buried town, with name signs and traffic rules and postmen. You rotate, days in the front line, days in support, days at rest, round and round. Nobody lives at the front for long. The trick of the whole machine is that everybody lives there briefly, forever. You learn the small miseries that fill the days between the large ones, the lice that no man is ever free of, the rats grown fat and bold on the dead, the rotting feet from the standing water, the endless cold tea and hard biscuit. And you learn stand to at dawn and dusk, every man to the parapet in the half-light when attacks come, staring into the murk for the shape of the enemy, twice a day, every day, for as long as you last. You learn the men beside you the way your grandfather learned a ship's crew, a stranger sort of family, judged not by your name but by whether you stand when it matters. In the line, for the first time, what you were born does not count. Only what you do in the next minute counts. It is a terrible freedom, and it is the same one your blood has found in every hard place it was ever sent. The storm of steel. And then the shelling. There is nothing your ancestors' world can compare it to, because it is the first truly industrial killing, hours, days, of high explosive tearing the earth apart, and there is no skill in surviving it and no courage that helps, only luck, blind and total, deciding second by second who is a man and who is a red smear on the trench wall. It is the thing that breaks even the brave, because it makes bravery meaningless. Follow one shell backwards and you find the whole world changed. It was filled in a factory in Leeds or Glasgow by a woman, one of a million women who walked into the munitions works when the men walked out, whose hands are stained yellow by the explosive, who are paid real wages for the first time in their lives. The war that is destroying your generation of men is, at home, quietly detonating the old order for the women. Nothing about your family will ever be arranged the same way again. You watch men you love become nothing in an instant. And you watch other men come apart in a way that leaves no mark, the ones who curl up and shake and cannot stop, whom the army will call cowards and some of whom the army will shoot because it does not yet have a word for what the shells do to the mind. You learn to fold your own fear down very small and very deep, and you do not look at it because the men who look at it do not come back. Night is when the front comes alive, because darkness is the only cover this battlefield has left. Wiring parties crawl out to mend the entanglements. Patrols slide into no man's land to listen under the enemy's parapet. Raiding parties go over with blackened faces and clubs and come back with prisoners, or don't. And over it all, both sides pump flares into the sky all night long. And the first thing every new man learns out there is that when the flare bursts, you freeze mid-step, like a child's game with death as the forfeit, because the machine guns traverse on movement, and stillness, absurd as it sounds, is armor. The Lance Corporal. You go over the top, and you live, which is the only qualification this war really asks. So many men die so fast that promotion is not earned so much as inherited from the dead, a single stripe for staying alive and steady when the man who had it did not. You learn what the attacks are, you climb from the trench at a whistle and walk because they order it, across open ground toward machine guns, and the guns cut lines of men down like a scythe through corn. And on that first morning on the Somme, whole pals battalions, whole towns worth of the lads you trained with, are gone between breakfast and noon. You are still alive. You never understand why, no one does. You lead a handful of men now, which mostly means you are the one who must be steady when there is no reason on earth to be. You learn to fold the fear down small and do the next necessary thing because the men are watching your face, exactly the way your grandfather watched the boat headers, to know whether to be afraid. Rest and letters. Here is the part the films never show. Most of the war is not the trench at all. Rotated back to rest, you live in barns and half-wrecked villages, deluge your shirts over candles, play football, queue at the estaminet where a French family sells eggs and chips and thin beer to boys who were at stand to yesterday morning. There are concert parties and boxing and endless fatigues hauling wire and rations up the line. The rum ration comes round at dawn in a stone jar, a mouthful, a man, and no sacrament in France is taken more seriously. The army has learned something the mills knew before it: men are machinery, and machinery must be maintained. And you write home. Everything you write passes under your officer's pencil, so you learn the code every family in Britain is learning. In the pinks means alive, somewhere in France means everywhere, and the printed field postcard, strike out the lines that do not apply, add nothing, says only, I am quite well. Your mother reads a card with 6 words not crossed out and understands everything the army will not let you say. The poor have always known how to speak inside the forms the powerful hand them. And spare one look for the other army, the one that never volunteered, the animals. 1,000,000 horses and mules haul the guns and the rations through mud that swallows them whole, and the army grieves them in its ledgers as honestly as it grieves men, because a lost horse cannot be replaced by a poster. Carrier pigeons fly through shell fire with messages strapped to their legs. Dogs run the trenches with bandages and cigarettes. Your grandfather worked beside oxen, your father beside pit ponies, and here, at the end of the old world, the beasts of burden are still dying beside the poor, exactly as they always have. The sergeant. 2 years of surviving what killed the others, and they make you a sergeant, the backbone of the army, the man who actually runs the war at the level where the war is real, who knows every man and every job and holds the whole line together with his voice and his will. And you meet the newest weapon, the one that needs no courage to use and none to defeat you, the gas. A green-yellow cloud rolls across no man's land on the wind, and a man who is slow with his mask drowns slowly in his own chest over days, and you drill the men on the masks until they hate you, because the hating keeps them alive, which is the whole of a sergeant's love. There is even a war below the war. Miners, real miners, your father's trade, recruited straight from the pits, dig tunnels under no man's land and pack them with explosive beneath the enemy line, while German miners dig toward them, and sometimes the 2 tunnels meet in the dark, and men fight with spades 60 feet under the mud. When the great mines go up, the explosions can be heard in London. The poor man's oldest work turned into the war's most terrible weapon. And you take the new boys, 18 and green and sick with fear their first week, and you are hard with them, because a gentle education here gets a man killed. The same hardness the mate gave your grandfather, the same the mill gave your father, handed down a line none of you knew you were standing in. The officer. The officer's a gentleman, that is the rule, old as the reeve and the lord, and gentlemen die faster than anyone leading from the front, and by 1916 there are not enough of them left. So the army does the thing. It swore it never would. It commissions men from the ranks. They make you an officer. A temporary gentleman they call it, and they mean the temporary. You lead men over the top now, and you are the first out and the first shot at, and you understand the joke exactly. They gave you the king's commission because the job had become too deadly for the men it was meant for. You rose, the way your grandmother rose in the plague, because the rank above you had been emptied by death. Look down your own trench line, because the whole world is standing in it. Indian cavalrymen fighting dismounted in the mud of a country they had never heard of. Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders, whose nations will date their birth from these battles. Labour companies from China and Africa digging the trenches everyone else dies in. The Empire told them all the same story. It told you, king, glory, home by Christmas, and it buries them in the same clay, under the same standard issue stone. If you live, and against everything you live, you go home a working man who was, for 2 years, called a gentleman, and who will spend the rest of his life not quite belonging to either world. You will marry, and be quiet about the war, and stand very straight, and take off your cap to your wife across a yard, and never once wonder where the straight back came from. It came down the line to you, the workhouse and the mill, and the whale ship and the plague and the asylum, every ancestor who found in some hard place that they were worth more than the world had told them and paid for the knowing. You are the far end of that line. You did not know you were carrying it. You carried it anyway. That is the whole of it. And for people like you, it is enough, and it is more than the world ever meant you to have. And if you want to see where the silence in his eyes was first taught, the locked building where this family's story began, and the 40 years one man spent climbing from a numbered bed to the master's chair inside it, the asylum is where this whole long line first learned to survive. Watch it next. One private, 19 years old, fed into a war that measured its gains in yards and its cost in boys. History is full of these trenches. We're opening them one life at a time. Subscribe, and no one gets forgotten twice.